Hello, my lovely little serpents. Welcome back. In light of recent events, Paramount copyrighted my video and our ensuing power struggle, I thought we could take it back once again to Hollywood's yesteryear, because clearly I experience a lot of luck in that area of interest.
Everybody knows the things she does to please.
Just so everyone has some idea of what this figure is, the femme fatale, as defined by Oxford Dictionary, is an attractive and seductive woman, especially one who is likely to cause distress or disaster to a man who becomes involved with her. If you've taken any gender studies class, you've probably heard a lot of bad things about this character trope, big, bad, anti-feminist things that second-wave feminists in particular have said that she represents, and I'm here today to tell you that they're wrong. Or, well, kind of. The femme fatale is mostly attributed to 40s and 50s classic film noir films, but 99% of Western media has some roots in Judeo-Christian and Greek mythology, and so even though I'm focusing on mainly classic noir films today, it's important to look at her origins, the setup that led to her contemporary emergence, if you will. So many people consider the first femme fatale to be Eve. Yes, the Eve from the story of Adam and Eve. In the book of Genesis, it is said that God told Adam and Eve they could eat whatever they wanted except for the forbidden fruit on the tree of knowledge in the Garden of Eden. Of course, there is a nasty little serpent that we kind of don't put enough blame on, but yes, it tempts Eve to pick the fruit. She then tempts Adam to eat the fruit with her in order to gain illicit knowledge, and thus lures him and the rest of humankind to their spiritual deaths. And so because of this action, in much of the literature, Eve is analyzed as being the first archetypal femme fatale.
Good for her.
Similarly, in Greek mythology, there are tons of femme fatale figures. One of the most popular ones is probably Medusa. Her power, that she can turn men into stone by looking at them, ties in themes of feminine appearances and its destructive power. And if you believe Freud, then she also represents masculine shame because her snake hair resembles phalluses, and in the myth, when Perseus beheads her, it's like symbolic castration. Or something. But we're not going to get into that because Freud talks out of his ass, and I cannot stand that fraudulent sexist man.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
According to Kiki Kerglau, the associate curator in the Met's Department of Greek and Roman Art, beauty, like monstrosity, enthralls, and female beauty in particular, was perceived to be both enchanting and dangerous, or even fatal. This is proven even more so with Lucian's version. In his retelling of the story, it was not Medusa's monstrous face that turned men to stone, but her beauty that, quote, stunned its beholders and made them speechless. So as we can see, the connection between beauty, sexuality, and
male death
has been tied to women characters for a very long time now. However, despite these previous incarnations of dangerous, seductive women, I would say that the first wave of the femme fatale as a type of character didn't come about until the late 1800s. In The Romantic Agony, Mario Praz says, during the first stage of Romanticism up till about the middle of the 19th century, we meet with several fatal women in literature, but there is no established type of fatal woman in the way that there is an established Byronic hero. And you may be wondering why that is. Well, multiple scholars have suggested that male anxieties around rising lower classes, foreign invasion, and feminism have all influenced 19th century depictions of the femme fatale. Also, something very interesting, one of the reasons for anxiety around feminism is because in the Victorian era, there was also a rise in female crime. Female violence was viewed as something very unnatural, like women are not supposed to be like that. So if a woman is like that, it means something is extremely wrong. Whereas if a male is violent, it's wrong, but it's expected. People at the time understood that men could get aggressive. They just could not understand why women could get aggressive. Like, what could possibly drive women to violence? Like, what could possibly? we oppress them in all areas of life and don't let them have jobs or property. We also enact violence onto them and get away with it. Yeah, what could possibly drive women to violence? Judith Nelman writes, by the 1840s, when murder by women seemed very prevalent, the press was regularly registering profound shock, contempt, disgust, and dismay at the increasing evidence that women were killing members of their own families for money. So on the surface, it sounds like a lot of women were just like getting annoyed at home and starting to kill their like husbands or whatever.
They had it coming. They had it coming.
But in reality, it was a lot sadder. A lot of these murders were desperate mothers who were committing infanticide because they were too poor to feed all their children. The life insurance industry was also growing, which led to, sadly, more motivations for people to off themselves or off their relatives in order to get money to keep the rest of the family alive. One of the popular ways to commit murder was via arsenic poisoning. According to one London physician written in 1849, the crime of arsenic murder had become a national disgrace. This was such a big problem that the government actually passed legislation requiring apothecaries and pharmacists to record all arsenic sales in a poison book. While it's probably more satisfying to think that the femme fatale emerged because Victorian men were just extremely repressed, that's not entirely true. It's partially true, but there were multiple reasons. Jess Sully says that her problem with femme fatale scholarship is that many people propose that all femme fatales were created under the same circumstances and with the same intentions, regardless of the fact that very different artistic and literary groups existed in the 19th century. For example, in the 19th century, there was also a growing interest in ancient mythologies and esoteric religions. Artists and writers took inspiration from characters like Cleopatra, Medusa, and Salome, and creatures like vampires and sirens. This interest is also probably why depictions of the 19th century femme fatale leaned on mystical and orientalist imagery. This imagery was then exploited by Fox Studio in the 1910s. Probably the most significant femme fatale actress in early cinema history was Theda Bara. She often played this orientalist femme fatale, most notably Cleopatra. However, she was only acting for about 4 years, and then her contract was not renewed in 1919. Diane Negra notes that Bara and other vamp actresses, such as Nita Naldi, Lyda Putty, and Pola Negri, had heritage in Southern and Eastern European countries or played characters of these origins. The fall of the femme fatale and the rise of the all-American good girl, portrayed by the likes of Mary Pickford and Clara Bow, coincide with strengthening anti-immigrant values. I do want to clarify first that the movies that we call film noir today from the 40s and 50s were not labeled as film noir at the time. That label only became widely used in the 1970s. As James Naramore says, film noir is an idea that we projected onto the past. With that in mind, let's get into what film noir is. According to Janie Place, the dominant worldview expressed in film noir is paranoid, claustrophobic, hopeless, doomed, predetermined by the past, without clear moral or personal identity. The visual style conveyed this mood through expressive use of darkness, both real and predominantly underlit and nighttime scenes, and psychologically through shadows and claustrophobic compositions, which overwhelm the character in exterior as well as interior settings. According to Michelle Mercure, key elements of the genre include Humphrey Bogart. Just kidding.
Hey, Queen. Girl, you have done it again. Constantly raising the bar for us all.
Key characteristics of the classic film noir include a male protagonist, usually a private detective, some element of criminality, a lack of morality, and an ambiguous plot. In general, there is an aura of uncertainty that permeates throughout the film. But why is this the case? Sylvia Harvey says, the feelings of loss and alienation expressed by the characters in film noir can be seen as the product both of post-war depression and of the reorganization of the American economy. Corporations were growing bigger, monopolies were being established, and small businesses were getting squeezed out by competition. Women were also introduced in the labor force, and while this was temporary, it did shift the dynamics of the traditional family unit. And so film noir can also be seen as an indirect response to this, quote, assault on traditional family structures and values.
Look, you might as well know it now, both of you. Your father and I have decided to separate.
One clear example is the film Mildred Pierce, which came out in 1945. The main character, Mildred, played by Joan Crawford, becomes a business mogul after leaving her husband and needing to support her daughters. Harvey writes, "The image of Mildred in a masculine style of dress, holding her account books and looking away from her lover, typifies this kind of displacement." So now that we're getting into the female characters, let's define the femme fatale a little bit more clearly. According to Mercure, some of the most prominent characteristics of the outward appearance of the femme fatale include a cigarette, long, sexy legs that often dominate the frame, thick, luscious lips, gorgeous, wavy hair that frames her face perfectly, and an attire that is often very flashy, fur shawls and coats, long gloves that extend to the elbows, evening gowns that shimmer and sparkle, clothing that reveals legs, cleavage, arms, back, and or shoulders, and a sexy pair of high heels. The femme fatale's sexual power is an important aspect of her character.
Gilda, are you decent?
Me?
Because of this, scholars like Janie Place view the femme fatale as being a manifestation of the male protagonist's internal fears of sexuality and his need to control and repress it.
You can't keep getting away with it!
I feel like I need to put a disclaimer or something here. I don't disagree entirely with this take. I just hate Freud, and so I get irritated when people try to shove genitalia into literally everything. Like, I literally read a sentence that femme fatales holding guns is like symbolizing women taking sexual power from men because guns are phallic. Like, I don't know about that. Also, so much of Freud's research has been disproven, and he's also a pedophilia apologist. I'll leave info about it in the description so YouTube doesn't demonetize me, but yeah. Mercure writes, "The femme fatale is an actress in every sense of the word. She lies, cheats, double-crosses, even murders her victims, and then cries, screams, sings, or whispers words of affection to the male protagonist to win him over, only to double-cross him again."
Your sister's a very dangerous woman, Katie. She could worm the secrets right out of a sphinx.
And unlike her predecessor, the vamp seductress, often her motivation is ambition. And because she is a woman, this ambition is inappropriate and must be squashed. Sometimes the femme fatale is not evil, like Laura from the movie Laura. Her only fault is that she falls in and out of love with 3 different men. It's their projection onto her and their jealousy that sets off a murder.
When a man has everything in the world that he wants, except what he wants most, he loses his self-respect. It makes him bitter, Laura.
That wasn't her intention, but it's the independence which is the problem here, and she and everyone around her must be punished for that. As Place says, whether evil or innocent, her desire for freedom, wealth, or independence ignites the forces which threaten the hero.
I never have been, and I never will be bound by anything I don't do of my own free will.
So because of these motivations, a lot of scholars have viewed the 1940s femme fatale as being part of this wartime disillusionment. Specifically, they view the femme fatale as being a cautionary tale, warning women to get back in the home so men can have their jobs back. And this is supported by the fact that at the end of these film noirs, the femme fatale is often punished in some way. She either dies or goes to jail. But Marc Jancovich does point out a hole in this theory, which is that these dangerous women were usually not working women. They were usually greedy women who were using men to get money quickly and easily. They weren't trying to get any jobs. In the case of Mildred Pierce, the femme fatale is not the hardworking Mildred, but her lazy, spoiled daughter. But personally, I believe there is some truth in that some of these movies reflect post-wartime anxieties about women in the workforce. And it's also no surprise that misogynistic ideals would creep into the scripts because society as a whole was misogynistic at the time. Still definitely is. But I think blindly clinging on to one societal ideology of the time as the reason for everything can be quite limiting. Steve Neal argues that the concept of film noir itself tries to homogenize a bunch of very distinct movies. Remember what I said? This genre label came out 20 years or so after the movies were already made. And so what we end up with is a set of rules that dictate the film noir genre, and a bunch of movies that contradict those rules but are still considered to be part of the genre. And it's confusing. Like, Laura is considered to be a femme fatale even though she has no villainous bones in her body. Anytime a woman from these movies is even remotely desirable by men, she is pigeonholed as being a femme fatale. And I think that's a super lazy way of understanding the material. And this is just a problem I have with tropes in general. I think tropes offer some structure and some understanding for us, but at the same time, it doesn't account for all these exceptions. And if you actually have seen a lot of film noir movies, you'll realize that every main woman character is completely different from the others. And I think by labeling these women as merely femme fatales, it's a disservice. I still am going to keep doing it for the purposes of this video, but that's my stance on the situation. And also something to consider is that a lot of women at the time loved the femme fatale character. I mean, a lot of women still like the femme fatale character, hence the hashtag good for her movement. In Virginia Allen's book, Femme Fatale, Erotic Icon, she discusses that the femme fatale was popular among women even in the 19th century. She says, the femme fatale offered one of the few role models for women in the 19th century that combined freedom with fascination and erotic intrigue. By imitating the femme fatale, women could imagine that they acquired more than her attractions, her freedom, her sexual independence, and considerable enjoyment. So rather than being interpreted as solely a cautionary tale warning women to stick to the rules of patriarchal society, the femme fatale can also be subverted by viewers like us into becoming this empowering role model. I want to talk about two movies in particular very briefly that I think can be reinterpreted. The first movie is the 1947 film Out of the Past. In Out of the Past, the protagonist and detective Jeff Bailey falls in love with femme fatale Kathy Moffat, played by Jane Greer. Jeff was initially hired to find her by her ex-boyfriend Whit Sterling because she allegedly shot Whit and stole his $40,000.
Good for her.
There's a lot of double-crossing and murder. It's honestly a little bit confusing, and I don't really want to try to explain it, but at the end of the movie, Jeff tries to turn Kathy into the police, and Kathy shoots him dead, and then the police shoot her dead. What I've taken away from this movie is not that Kathy is inherently evil, but that she resorts to murder as her only means of escaping from her relationships with men. And because of this, even though Kathy dies, it's hard to imagine that this film could in any way be endorsing marriage as a good place for women. John and Stephanie Blaser further argue that Kathy's death signifies her unwillingness to compromise her rebellious values, and that is in part why we remember her allure and confidence so well after the movie is long over. They write, "It is the image of the powerful, fearless, and independent femme fatale that sticks in our minds when these movies end, perhaps because she, unlike powerful women in other Hollywood films, remains true to her destructive nature and refuses to be converted or captured, even if it means that she must die." The other movie I want to talk briefly about is Gilda, which came out in 1947 and stars Rita Hayworth as Gilda. This movie's protagonist is Johnny Farrell, a casino manager who works under the mysterious and powerful Balin Mudson. Balin goes off to get married, and when he comes back, it's revealed that his new wife, Gilda, used to date Johnny. Throughout the movie, Johnny believes Gilda to be a promiscuous, unfaithful woman because she openly flirts and dances with other men. But it's revealed later on that her promiscuity was a performance to get under Johnny's skin, and Gilda had always been faithful to her male partners. Through Johnny's eyes, Gilda is a psychological tormentor. Her famous striptease is not coded as sexy to him, but as manipulative and deceitful. While the striptease as a concept has traditionally been a male fantasy, it rouses frustration in Johnny, and he has her dragged off stage. But this striptease is actually very powerful for women. Michelle Mercure writes, "By causing this tension for Johnny, Gilda prevents the satisfaction of his desire to control her. Gilda successfully uses her objectification to produce a pleasureless experience for her subject, a frustrating one, in fact. What she is really doing by performing for Johnny on and off stage is teaching him, and the viewer, a lesson that his and our relationship with her should not be one of subject versus object." And the film critic, Bosley Crowther, actually hated this movie in his review. He said, "Rita wears many gowns of shimmering luster and tosses her tawny hair in glamorous style, but her manner of playing a worldly woman is distinctly 5 and a dime. A couple of times she sings song numbers with little distinction and wiggles through a few dances that are nothing short of crude." I honestly think Mr. Crowther is not a man of taste, but maybe that's just me. Adrian L. McLean has suggested that the reason for this distaste among male film critics is probably because Gilda is not a male fantasy, but a woman's film. And that brings me to my next point, which is that in some ways, film noir is tailored to female audiences.
Why would you say something so controversial yet so brave?
Female spectatorship is something that has gone generally unnoticed in film feminist theory. And much of the reason honestly has to do with our preoccupation with the male gaze. The male gaze, if you don't know, is the act of depicting women from a cis heteromasculine perspective that represents women as sexual objects. Ew. And I fully believe in the male gaze. Like, I believe it exists. The only thing I'm saying is that in a lot of feminist discourse, so much emphasis is put on the male gaze, and there's not enough emphasis on the female gaze. And Dennon says that women use spectatorship to learn behaviors and project personal desires onto the woman that they like in film. She writes, "The female gaze trained on the femme fatale takes her sexiness, her beauty, and her fetishized fashion as honest signals of power." Also to note, because of World War II and because a lot of men were off fighting the war, the majority of audiences at movie theaters were women. Angela Martin writes, "There had to be something in these film noirs for female spectators, whether it was the treat of seeing women giving as good, if not better, than they got, the idea that men and women can be equally evil or equally innocent, confirmation of the existence of masculine perversity, or simply the refreshingly life-size image of male fallibility." And Dennon goes so far to argue that film noir's prioritization of character development and personal relationships and the overall characterization of women characters all follow female viewer preferences. Some reviews of the time even validate this theory. In October 1946, Picturegoer published the story, "Will the Goody-Goody Heroine Survive?" And in it they write, "Why are so many of the present screen heroines so tough? This question has been put to us many times recently, and the only logical answer we can give is that you, the picture-goers who pay, like them that way. The era when movie heroines had to be sweeter than a chocolate sundae and wind up in the hero's arms appears to have run its course." In her book, Stargazing, Hollywood Cinema and Female Spectatorship, feminist film theorist Jackie Stacey interviewed British women who went to the movies in the 40s and 50s to research attitudes towards actresses of the time. She observed that not only did a lot of these women admire the beauty of the actresses, but they also admired the way she handled situations, which goes to show Dennon's point. One of the interviewees, Joan Clifford, said, "I liked seeing strong, capable, and independent types of female characters, mostly because I wished to be like them." A lot of these roles that these women play are punished at the end of the movie, either by death or jail time, or sometimes worse,
marriage.
But Stacey notes that these female spectators did not choose to talk about this aspect at all. Instead, they focus on the femme fatale's desirable characteristics, the characteristics that they often wish they had themselves. Janine Bassinger argues that all movies were made with men and women audiences in mind because producers just wanted as many people at the theater as possible. But obviously that's an impossible task, so a lot of these movies end up having mixed messages, which leads to mixed interpretations. Is Gilda empowering for rebellious women, or is her ending reunion with Johnny appealing to patriarchal society? It could be read either way. What I'm mainly trying to say is that the femme fatale is a complex archetype. Rather than writing her off as this definite anti-feminist character that we've sincerely outgrown since the 40s and 50s, we should accept her as just a character that means something different to different people. For some people, she represents the worst misogynistic parts of mid-20th century American society, and for others, she represents a confident and free young woman unwilling to compromise herself in a time period that was forcing women to stay in this very rigid structure. It just depends on you and what scenes or aspects of her that leave a lasting impression on your mind. Okay, so this is the end of the video. Thank you so much for coming along with me on this ride. Let me know in the comments what you think of the femme fatale archetype and who your favorite femme fatale of the era was. Mine is personally Barbara Stanwyck in Double Indemnity. I also just am biased towards Barbara Stanwyck in general. I love her to death. Anyways, I hope you all have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you next time. Bye.